I first became aware of the great work by Dr. Gretchen Rudham when she absolutely bowled me over with a wonderful and engaging presentation at the Conference for Acceleration about 3 years ago. Fast forward a year, I was very happy and very fortunate to be able to hire Gretchen as a member of the full-time faculty in English at CCBC. So during her time here at CCBC, she has devoted much of her energy and passion, those words again, to the Black Male Think Tank, of which she will talk today, and a great innovation at our college. So here is Dr. Gretchen Rudham.
Does everyone want to stretch for a second? No? I know, after Bobby, I can't be more interactive than that. I can't promise that. Well, good morning, thanks. I'm very honored to be here. And I am fairly new in terms of full-time to CCBC Essex. I'm actually on the English faculty, but I certainly, in my lifetime before here, really worked with GED students. So I ran a GED program on the west side of Baltimore. Before that, I'd done some work overseas. In Africa, I'd also done some work with ESOL, so I certainly am very kind of aware of what learning environments mean and all the different places they take place. The hallway, as well as the classroom, on the phone. And so I'm really glad to see such a diverse group of faculty as well as just teachers of all kinds. So I'm going to show a bit of a video. This is my first go at this video, so bear with me. So I actually entitled it Conscious Conversations in the Learning Environment, and these are conversations that allow you to speak your truth while at the same time being able to hear others as they speak theirs. And now creating this space includes dialogue, it also includes authentic listening, and this is not something easy to do. So I want to begin by basically breaking down the three main concepts. So why should it be a conversation? Why should it be a conscious conversation? And then why should it be in the learning environment? Because, you know, believe it or not, a lot of people still lecture and don't create dialogue in the classroom, or still have kind of their, here's my spiel of what you can, I only have 20 minutes with you, let me just go through it. So this quote by Baldwin, to me, really, lately I'm trying to refocus my intentions around it encapsulates kind of how I strive to be in my work. Does that mean I'm always this way? No. But the idea of if you really love somebody, you really have to be comfortable in starting to make them conscious of the things that they don't see, right? So, and this is kind of two things. What they don't see about themselves, right? But also what they don't see about you. So I want us to start to think of these conscious conversations as not just a two-way process, but it's, you know, consciousness of kind of yourself as well as kind of those that are before you. So I strive to create a space in which students can become more aware of what they don't see about themselves as well as the world around them. And in this process of kind of opening a more conscious space, I start to begin to see things about the students that I didn't see before, right? As well as becoming more aware about myself. So today I want to actually begin my presentation by talking about two conversations in particular. One of them actually happened just about a month ago with a student. I was working in the writing center. So I want to bring up this conversation, full disclosure, it's not because all of my tutoring sessions are transformative, because that is definitely not the case. I don't want to pretend as if I'm going to talk about my my conversations in tutoring in the classroom as if there's some fabulous experience. They aren't. I'm a work in progress as well. But this was particularly interesting because it's a conversation that I completely had forgotten about. So this student had come in to work on college essays. His goal was to transfer to nursing school from CCBC. And as he sat down, again, we have 30 minutes in our time in the Writing Center with students. So I had, you know, instead of just launching into, well, let's look at your subject verb, as Rachel was saying, let me kind of see what's going on with this academic language. The student actually, I wanted to ask him, well, why are you going into nursing? Let's like back up. Let's begin with, why are you writing these essays? What's behind this? And what unfolded was this amazing story about kind of his motivation for wanting to become a nurse. And it's kind of rooted in this experience. His family couldn't afford health insurance when he was young, and he had a really painful experience breaking his arm, and they weren't able to give him anesthetics. And so all of this unfolding in the tutoring center, and you know, and then he told a story about being orphaned orphaned, right? So his experience as an orphan navigating college. None of this was in the essay draft, of course, that he brought to the Writing Center. And so I use this just because, first of all, it was 30 minutes with a student I had no prior experience with. We did not have a connection. This is not something, you know, and I didn't get to see him since until he gave me this fantastic card, you know, telling me that he got into Duquesne. And, you know, just that there's a lot of power in one conversation. And, you know, I'm doing this all the time, but I forgot that there's a lot of power in that. So just the idea that, and as you can see, I think this idea of, which people in this room get this, and you know, I'm really speaking to the choir, but this idea of like dropping the pity, right? Yes, that is a difficult story. Yes, he was orphaned. Yes, but the resilience of moving on. And he really thanked me of allowing him to explain it without feeling kind of depressed or cliche about that. But also presenting himself and his actual lived reality to the colleges that were accepting him. So I just want to start with that because I think that's what we experience, a lot of us do. We don't always get the beautiful, you know, cards with the clouds on it. But, you know, this happens. We're not always aware of kind of how the conversations impact people. So the second conversation I want to tell you about, because actually it's a really embarrassing story of my own. And nobody knows this, so I'm putting myself out there. This is actually extremely humiliating, but yet instructive. And I think, again, these conversations we can have with colleagues, we can have with students, they're not comfortable. Okay, so don't think because it's conscious we're all holding hands and singing Kumbaya. It's not what happens. And in the classroom, they're difficult. And the discomfort is what we need to start to be a little bit more comfortable with, is comfortable with the discomfort. So my second story is about the time when I was living, it's about 15 years ago, I was living in South Africa. And I really show this to tell you that becoming more conscious is certainly a journey, and I am fully still in process. But I was privileged to develop a close friendship with Humelo Biko, the son of Stephen Biko. And so for those of you who aren't, I mean, he's like African royalty, basically. I mean, his father was the father of Black consciousness in the South African movement. And so we had a conversation one evening, you know, and from the confines of, you know, my white bubble, right, I recall spouting something really ridiculously uninformed, and I can't remember the details of it, about like how I was going to speak about the Black experience in the U.S., okay? And so this actually, you know, I don't even remember what he said back to me. In fact, I think what was so powerful is that he didn't respond. But I do remember the look on his face, the disappointment, and I knew somehow I really had gotten something very wrong. And so I think I like to talk about this because two reasons. It's an example of a very disconscious conversation that I was having. But the point is it actually became a very big turning point for me in starting to figure out, wait, hold on. So this is a man whose father died at the hands of white police in custody. He was in utero, so he never even got to know his father due to a white policeman. But he's going to be patient with me. Wait a minute. And so I think the idea of he loved me enough to show me what I was not seeing about myself, about my country, about my whole being. And so this kind of really sat with me for a long time, but really did eventually inform how I returned back to my own country. I was really kind of set about the business of learning what I did not know, most particularly about the U.S. Black experience. And so that landed me in Baltimore. So as Baldwin reminds us, Humelo's love for me allowed me to awaken to the reality around me, and you know, he allowed me to mess up. And so I kind of want to make that clear that I'm not a perfect conscious conversationalist, nor am I, you know, wholly conscious myself. But I want to talk about his father, Stephen Biko, in terms of Black consciousness, because to me it's instructive. That's kind of how I come around to the idea of defining consciousness or conscious conversations in general. So this idea of his work kind of got me started thinking about what it means to kind of be conscious of yourself wherever you are, whether you're in post-apartheid South Africa, right? Or sadly, to me, Baltimore that didn't look very different than post-apartheid South Africa, where I was working. So bear with me, I'm not sure how I'm gonna move this forward. Regardless, so this is me in Cape Town, and really what I think it's in Hout Bay, but I think the idea that it really does just take one conversation. If I was in my mind getting ready ready for the presentation trying to realize what was like the most instructive conversation I've ever had in my life. And that would be it. So something that kind of allows you to stop and see yourself and kind of see what you don't really ever, you're so busy operating in, you don't really see. And I often have these moments with my students where later I'll think, wait a minute, what was that I just saw? Or what was that I just saw? And often it's what you think but don't have time to kind of talk about. And so lately I've tried to become more intentional about, wait, I'm going to have that conversation. Let's just pause. Okay, we can work on topic sentences tomorrow. Let's talk about this now. And so that's really informed a lot of how I create content in the classroom, but also just how the classroom structure and the design is. So let me just move this forward. So why conscious?
Well, I've always felt like I was sort of conscious, and I have this sense of pride in wanting to love being black and just love being who I am in general. But coming back and like remembering that everyone isn't where I am mentally, spiritually, physically is it's just part of it. I've had to learn that at a young age anyway, that like people aren't gonna love what I love the way that I love it, and it takes a while for people to get there. And you have to remember that you weren't always where you were, sort of. Like I wasn't always this enlightened, I love the cause type of guy. So just remembering that you have to call people in. That was another thing that we talked about, calling people in rather than calling them out and saying like, oh, you're a racist, oh, you're a homophobe, or oh, you hate the Native Americans because you live on this land as a white person. Instead of calling them out and making them villains and making yourself a victim, you should call each other in and accentuate what's positive about what we stand for, rather than focusing on the negative and trying to villainize everyone. And
So Marquise is talking about this dichotomy, right? It's very easy as you're trying to have conversations like this in your life, in the hallway, in a classroom, that it really becomes this like you're either a victim or you're a villain, and like that's it, and the conversation shuts down. And so kind of this idea of calling people in rather than calling them out, and I am certainly still working on that. In fact, I just did a presentation with Marquise, and he had to interrupt my calling out of someone to then call them back in. So this idea of talking about what it is that's kind of behind that, what it is that informs our assumptions and our beliefs and our perceptions, just slowing that down to actually just pick it apart. So this definition of disconsciousness to me is really instructive. It's defining disconsciousness, but this really helps me define what I see as conscious conversations. So very clearly, they are interrogating critical, they're creating critical habits of mind. Right? They are kind of unpacking the inequity and the exploitation, not shying away from discussions of it, diving into those discussions, as well as challenging the order of things as given. So kind of this as disconsciousness, the opposite is really what I'm trying to strive for in my interactions with colleagues as well as students, because this happens at the copier and at the coffee machine as well as in a learning environment. I mean, so this idea of critical habits of mind, what does that look like? And so today, my workshop, I'm hoping to dive into kind of like the how of that. Today we're going to talk about the why, just now I am, but later we're going to talk about this idea of what do critical habits of mind look like, and we're actually going to practice having conscious conversations with each other, because again, it's like a muscle. We do not have racialized conversations in the US easily at all. And so this idea of how do you have a racialized conversation in a class, and I'm not just speaking about race, I'm really speaking about, when I say conscious in conversations, I really mean all kinds of differences. So this idea of gender, this idea of sexual orientation, this idea of class, this idea of ethnicity, religion, immigration status, ability. So all these conversations kind of get at what's the kind of status quo, and how do we unpack that together as a class. So why is it important to have these in learning environments? I actually chose today to use some clips from students. And I think they do a beautiful job of distilling why they feel like educators need to begin this personal process of seeing their baggage of bias, right? Because it's baggage, okay? And Fumalobiko was ever able to show me a giant mirror and show me my baggage, right? And then the hard part is unpacking. Nobody likes to unpack when they come back from a trip. That's my worst. So unpacking this is uncomfortable. Again, it can be painful, but it's important.
Like, you have to like know where we came from to be able to understand and teach us, because we've been through a lot. And so a white teacher like might have privilege when we did and stuff. So definitely gotta like have some knowledge or background of what we've been through to be able to relate to it.
So personally, in my experience, like my first semester at York College, my professors were like underestimate my thinking ability. So it's just like they try to say what I said, like how do I put this, like with more knowledge. Like they kind of like make it seem like my answer was the dumb answer, but it really wasn't. But they just, so shocked that, ooh, he's smart, that they just kind of wanted to, like, I guess demean me or something like that. It feels like you haven't learned anything. Like, just put it in layman terms, it feels like you're being called dumb, and nobody likes being called dumb. And that pretty much is what stops people from reaching their peak academically, is because they feel like their thinking isn't enough because of somebody's body language or what they're saying to them, meaning like the professor. But it's just like, I answered the question, well, then they'd be like, oh yeah, but da 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 da, like, okay. Or I give you my paper and you just take it and give it back with all the bad stuff on it after I turn it in, like the final, and I can't do anything about it. So it's just like, okay, you didn't care enough to tell me what should be done in the first place, and you just let me do whatever. And it's just like, okay, they don't really want you here, like, because they're not trying to help. Like, that's all it is. It's about helping. Because that's what a professor's there to do, guide you and help you through as much as they can, like the best of their ability. So.
And so I think Donovan talks a lot about a lot of different things. The specifics of how that is not really, how his not belonging manifests in situations. It could be as simple as how he's getting comments back on his paper. It could be as simple as body language, right? And so there's a lot there. And this is kind of just a preview. I have about 5 minutes left. So I want to just kind of end by talking about, thinking about, because it's a lot of personal work, right? Doing this, we don't just jump in tomorrow, we're going to start having conscious conversations in the classroom. It takes a lot of personal work. I mean, for us as educators, we have to be willing to see our own baggage, and we have to be willing to ask ourselves constantly, right? Every time I'm stepping out of the class or in tutoring or whatever I'm working with students, what is just going on in the interaction? What's driving that? What am I not seeing, right? What is omitted? What is being hidden? And I think that kind of questioning, that line of questioning at least, helps me serve students better and position and center myself in my work. Etta Hollins talks about kind of teaching from the center. And so kind of trying to figure out, again, what's my center, where's the center of the students, where are we both coming from in our interactions?
It doesn't feel like it culturally connects with me. I think first it's the peers, but the main thing is the professor, because the professor crafts the whole class. It's like a train conductor. They're in charge, it's their train, you get on and you follow their lead. So I think that's a big thing, because if the professor doesn't make that openness and doesn't make the student feel comfortable, like they can come to him, that's why I think a lot of students might drop out or stuff. Because it's just like, if I know that professor's not going to help me, I'm not going to go to him, I'm not going to make them aware of my problem. And at the same time, on the flip side, the professor can say, well, you never came to me and all this. But, so I think the main thing, you have to make that student feel comfortable. Let your class know that you'll be there if they need to fall back on. Understand we adults and everybody in the college is over 18 or over 19 or however old it needs to be responsible for their own things. But everybody still needs support in that moment. So I think that's probably one of the main points that I can really honestly say that needs to be worked on. Because I dropped the class last semester just because I felt like the teacher, he was one of those teachers, well, today we're working on this, well, can I ask a question? Well, not right now, you see me in the middle of a lesson. He was one of those more outspoken professors that it's either my way or the highway. So he was really hard to work with.
So I'm going to kind of just wrap it up there. But Dequan's talking about, again, for him, there wasn't even a conversation. Like there was no interaction. And so again, how we set up rules to kind of make class run efficiently, but how we kind of set up, you know, especially our limited time with advising, our limited time with, right, in the Writing Center. I have the less than 30 minutes to work through with students, but, you know, trying to figure out how you're coming into that space. And that's all I have. So in the following session, we'll kind of practice conscious conversations and tools you can bring back into your work or with students or with colleagues. So thanks for your time. Any questions?